So today, my baby, Eden, is 26 years old. And a couple of weeks ago, she sent me a text and she said, for our birthdays, I bought us both the same necklace that Michelle Obama wore when she spoke at the Democratic Convention. And my first thought was, I wonder whose credit card that went on. But then she sent the little picture, and it was just a little $30 necklace. It looked like the letters love, but it was vote, V-O-T-E. And I thought, well, that is absolutely a perfect gift for the two of us, because in our years as mother and daughter, there is nothing we have enjoyed and found more enlivening than being involved in political campaigns together. It started when she was 9. We went down to the John Kerry headquarters on Warnell. It's now a rug shop. And I remember she went in there, this little blonde, blue-eyed girl, and they kind of smiled and said, well, obviously you can't phone bank, but you can straighten the snack table. Well, of course, by the end of the week, she was running the phone bank, and then she was sitting at the front table, kind of, overseeing the operation. And we had her 10th birthday party there because she was always there. 4 years later, we kind of got in on the ground floor, really before the Obama team had really coalesced in like early, late spring. And she ended up again as an 8th grader, just living at the headquarters. I mean, it was 24/7 when she wasn't at school, and it was all day and all night. And in the years since then, in the 16 years since she made her first trip and ended up going to St. Louis and speaking at the presidential debates and a little press conference before, we have both found it to be so enlivening. And if you've been around me, you've heard me say that the happiest time in my life, the time in my life when I felt most hopeful and most alive and most like I was doing what I was called to do, were in the months leading up to that first election of President Obama. And I don't know how to even explain it. It was just like this, I hate to say high, but just everything was just so rich and so thankful and so hopeful. And it makes me think of Jacqueline Novogratz, who wrote that book, Manifesto for a Moral Revolution, and who started that organization called Acumen 20 years ago that brings together capital investors with social entrepreneurs to make a real change in the lives of the 2 billion poor on the planet. I mean, they've touched 300 million people through electricity and toilets and education. And the question she always asks people when she's interviewing them, or when she's meeting with a group of women who are slum dwellers in Mumbai, the question she says is, what are you doing when you feel the most beautiful? What are you doing when you feel the most alive? When you feel like you are in the flow, when life is just so rich and so full and you are in the zone and you feel as if you are living out your purpose. That's exactly what we've got in the Apostle Paul. That guy lived his life kind of fully out there. He had experienced Christ, and every single thing in this book is this outpouring of a person who is living out God's call. It starts with these words of deep connection. He's connected not just to his spirit, to God in Christ. He's connected to Timothy and the servants and the bishops and the people. And it's so full of encouragement. I just can't thank God enough for you. I'm so thankful. Rejoice, rejoice. And again, I say rejoice. I mean, it's just over and over and over. And the odd thing about this is that Paul is writing from prison. He's not, preaching at Arrowhead Stadium. It's not like, oh my gosh, there's so many people coming out to hear. No, he's behind bars, right? I mean, this is not his best moment, folks. He's kind of in the place maybe many of us have found ourselves in, where the dream job ends, where life as we know it, school and choir and football, it all just shuts down. Maybe he's at the place where the best friend has left or the partner has said, I'm done. This is not a yes we can moment, okay, for the Apostle Paul. This is a no we can't moment. And the interesting thing about that is that these moments, they seem to come so close together in our lives. It's become fashionable to describe the current administration as a response to the previous administration, that this is kind of the response to Obama. Yes, we can, followed by no, we can't. We were going to expand and be this inclusive country that welcomes everyone and can't have enough spots at the table and realizes it's our diversity that makes us strong. And then it's like, no way, are you kidding me? No, just white folks, pro-America, American nationalism. Jill Lepore, the Harvard historian, points out quite helpfully that these two things are not a response to one another. They're not a backlash. They are both two different ways of responding to the same moment in our history. This moment where the climate is a catastrophe. This moment where wildfires and hurricanes ravage. This world where there are more refugees than ever. This world where the future of work and family and technology and the rapidity of change and roboticization and globalization has just thrown everyone off. And so there's a part of us, probably all of us, yes, we can. And probably some part of us, no, we can't. And what Paul shows us here is that you have got to dig deep. You have got to ask yourself right now, what makes me feel alive? What helps me get up in the morning? What allows me to keep on going? And Paul, it's not just doing what he's called to do, which is preaching the gospel. I mean, this guy, he never took a day off, right? He just couldn't. It's also emptying yourself for other people. And this passage here in the second chapter of Philippians, what does it say? Do nothing out of conceit, but do everything for others. Let others' interest always go before yours. Pour yourself out for others. And I think right now, with what we've got going on, there is nothing that can save us except for turning the camera away from us and looking at other people. As hard as that is to do, is asking, what does our partner need? What do our kids need? What does our neighbor need? What does our world need? And realizing that these two movements, yes we can, no we can't, they are so close together. And in there is a choice for us to make. 2 years ago was a historic election. More women were elected to Congress, more women of color than ever in our history, people, more women than ever. And there was the largest expansion of voting rights in our nation's history since 1971, when the voting age was lowered from 21 to 18, when the voters of Florida, who tied 50-50 on their governor, tied 50-50 on the Senate, 65% of residents of Florida went to the polls and voted to restore voting rights to 1.4 million people who had been banned from voting for life because they had a prison record. This was an 18-year struggle led by the ACLU and joined by groups like the Catholic Coalition, the Catholic bishops, the evangelicals, the Koch brothers. This was a wide swath of people who came together under this banner of second chances, who said, yes, we can. He said, if you really expect people to claim their life as a citizen of this country and you won't let them vote, really? All those people came together understanding the deep racism behind that the vote, this decision to take the vote from felons, previous felons, people who've done, that wasn't in the Constitution, folks. That came about during Reconstruction. That came about when we said, yes, we can, the slaves can vote, the former slaves can vote, and then the state said, yeah, I don't know, we're going to put up poll taxes and stupid tests, and we're going to put up barriers to anybody who's committed a crime, or at least a crime that someone who was a former slave would be likely to commit. So in the state of Mississippi, if you killed somebody, you didn't lose your right to vote. But if you took their chicken, you lost your right to vote, right? And it had gotten so ridiculous in the state of Florida that by the year 2018, 1 in 3 African American men could not vote. So 65% of the people in that state, that deeply divided state, said, yes, they can. And the next friggin' day, The governor and the legislature started trying to take that away. And they've been pretty successful. They've added in new fines and new barriers, and now half of those 1.4 million won't be eligible to vote in this election. And you know what the people who've been working on this for 18 years did? They're still working on it, folks. They're still reaching deep. You know why? Because it makes them feel alive. My grandmother, Annie Catherine Pointer Rofus, never voted in her life. She was born in 1895 in North Texas. Her family had been in this country since the mid-1700s. She was one of the strongest, sturdiest women you have ever seen. Nobody backtalked Granny Rofus. The story is legendary about how when the bankers came to repossess the farm, she chased them off the property, and they managed to sell that farm before the bankers could take it. She married my grandfather. He was born in 1879 in Switzerland, came here as an infant. His mother left her husband back in the old world and never divorced him, came here and married a guy in Texas, and maybe because she never ended that marriage, she never applied for citizenship, and neither did my grandfather. So he was never able to vote, even though he lived here and farmed for 90 years. And my grandmother, Granny Rofus, didn't vote, as the kids always had understood, kind of out of deference to her husband. And I believed that story until last month, when all the papers were full of stories about what happened when women got the right to vote, and celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, and being aware too that there were so many women, African American women, who would have to wait another 45 years. And then there were tens of thousands of women like my grandmother who were not able to vote either because they lost their citizenship, which they didn't know, in 1907 under the Expatriation Act, which Congress passed with almost no attention or opposition or fanfare, which said that when a woman, an American woman, married a man who was not a citizen, she became a citizen of his country. So my grandmother became a citizen of either Switzerland or Germany, or if neither country would claim my grandfather, which was probably the case, then neither one of them had citizenship anywhere. And it wasn't just that tens of thousands of women lost the right to vote when it came about in 1920. You lost your constitutional rights, you could be deported, you lost your ability to have property. I mean, it's just like the stupidest thing ever. And it was like in the 20s and 30s, and if you had made the mistake of marrying a Chinese or Japanese man, let me tell you, you're lucky if you've got it now, right? Ethel McKissick was in the same situation as my grandmother, except for not at all. She was born into wealth in Northern California. She was born in 1885. Her parents lived in Santa Cruz. They were wealthy landowners. She went to the best schools in San Francisco. She studied music and science and art. And she married a man who was a professional singer. And in California, women already had the right to vote by 2011. In 2013, she goes in to register, and she's told that she can't register because she's a British citizen. And she's like not having it. So she sues the Board of Elections, she loses, it goes up and she sues, and it keeps going until it gets to the Supreme Court in 2015, in case you don't think who matters who's on the Supreme Court. And in 2015, the Supreme Court rules against her and says, even if a woman didn't know she lost her citizenship, well, she still voluntarily got married. Now, Ethel McKissick had a remedy. Ethel McKissick had a remedy in that her husband and she had the means to deal with the naturalization and the repatriation and go to court and file the papers and become a citizen so that she could regain the right to vote. And we know almost nothing about Ethel McKissick. She's like so many people who fought for the vote who are nothing more than a footnote, except for we know this one thing, this little line, that until her death in 1959, she stayed active in causes of justice and equality for others. She kept fighting because, as she said, she knew Granny Rofus couldn't take the remedy she had taken. She kept fighting for the people like my grandmother, who raised 11 kids. 2 of the boys went off and fought the Second War, who farmed until her husband was in his 90th year on a farm with no running water, right? She gave it her all. She poured out herself. And you know why she stayed in the fight and the struggle? Because it made her feel alive. What makes you feel alive? What makes you feel beautiful? What makes you feel like in a small, simple way, you're taking this bruised and broken world a little closer to the vision God has for all of us? Amen.